So I'm going to talk today about everyday creativity. What is everyday creativity? Well, let me talk to you a little bit about the definition of creativity. Now, first off, there are many, many, many definitions. Everybody can come up with his or hers, and they all would be valid. But the one that's most widely accepted is novelty that's useful. And what do I mean by useful? I mean, saves you money, saves you time, saves you frustration, could help you be more organized. Okay, now, you know what novel means. Of course, it means, new, original, innovative. Now, everyday creativity takes these same elements, novelty and usefulness, and adds one more aspect, meaningfulness. And by meaningful, I'm simply saying that the solution is something personal to you. You come up with a solution for a problem that's bothering you and a solution that works for you. That's what makes it everyday creativity. You don't have to be innovative. You don't have to make $1 million off of it. You just have to have it work for you. Now, there are certain skills that if you use and practice, they're going to help you come up with creative solutions for everyday creative solutions and other ones as well. And these are what I call the creative three. The tolerance of ambiguity, the tolerance of complexity, and you know what? I'm not going to tell you what the third one is. I'm going to leave that one a little bit of mystery for right now. So let me go into the tolerance of ambiguity. This means that while you're working on a problem, you defer judgment on possibilities, possible solutions. You avoid premature closure. Now, what do I mean by premature closure? I think an easy way to understand it is to think of a detective show. A crime is committed and the police are looking for suspects, and they'll usually arrest somebody pretty close to the beginning of the show. Now, you and I know that that person they arrest is hardly ever the one who did the crime. Well, tolerance of ambiguity is like that. The first solution that you come up with to solve a problem is hardly ever the right one, the best one for you. So you need to tolerate, in other words, be patient and keep going till you find the solution that really works for you. Let me give you an example of how tolerance of ambiguity has worked in my life. I wear very colorful clothes, like you can see, these greens and aquas, and I have pinks and yellows and oranges. And I have this quirk. I like to match the color of my clothes to the color of my hangers. So I have all these different hangers, and that's great, but they usually end up looking like this. I also can't hang them up because I got too many things on the line. So it would be very difficult for me to pull out a particular color hanger for a particular piece of clothing. So I was looking around for a solution. And one day I saw a catalog, and it had this triangular shaped box, as you could see. And you're supposed to lay the hangers down flat, but I put them upright so that I could distinguish between the colors. But you know what? It still didn't work. They still got tangled. I still couldn't sort them out very well. So it was not the best solution. So I kept looking and looking and looking. And one day I was in my craft room and I was putting together papers that I use for cards, and I saw this paper holder. And you can see this holds very large pieces of craft paper. And while I was consolidating with them, I was emptying a bunch of them, and I threw a lot of them into the closet. And I think a couple of days later, I saw all these empty boxes, and I thought, wait a minute, I wonder if the hangers would fit in there. And you know what? They did. So I got all the different colors, and I sorted one color to each box, and you could see, this is what I have today. I have this all lined up on the bottom of my closet, and it works perfectly. I don't break the hangers, which cost me money, and I'm organized, and I can grab them very fast, and I can store them very fast. So you can see how tolerance of ambiguity helped me with this. I didn't go for the first solution, which was that triangular box. I got this solution. I'll give you another example. In fact, this is one that was used at work by an unnamed acquaintance of mine, actually my husband Neil. He's an engineer, and at the time he was managing a group of engineers. and they needed to get a progress report on a particular medical device. Well, they were late. They missed the deadline. Now, in their defense, the company had been sold, and there was a lot of reorganization going on. It took months and months and months, and so they just didn't get to it. And it must have been another 6-7 months. My husband noticed the deadline. Again, the company got sold, so these guys were, just trying to keep their heads above water. But it got to a point where it was almost a year that deadline had been missed, and my husband wanted to get this report. But he's the kind of guy that doesn't like to be nasty. He doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. He doesn't want to send a nasty email. So he's looking around for a way to motivate these guys instead of punishing them. Well, one day he was driving around and he saw a florist shop. And he thought, wait a minute. The very next day, the engineering department got a delivery. Beautiful bouquet of flowers, with, of course, a little florist card that said, to the engineering department. And they were really surprised. So they opened it up and it said, happy first anniversary of the deadline for the progress report. Well, they were really taken aback by this. In fact, one guy did think it was very cool because they knew they missed it. But you know what? It worked. A few days later, my husband had that report on his desk. And you know what? Those guys will never forget getting that bouquet of flowers. It really motivated them. Now I'm going to talk about the tolerance of complexity. The tolerance of complexity means that you have a direction, and while you're going through the possibilities, you're doing the same as you do with the tolerance of ambiguity. You're not judging what you're coming up with. The difference is that you do have a direction, you know where you're going. Okay, let me give you an example. I have a friend who's a really good cook, but she has 2 picky eaters in her family, her son and her husband. She has this really good turkey meatball recipe that they like. However, my friend travels a lot, and she wanted to convert this recipe to a crock pot recipe so that they could just pull it out of the freezer, throw it in the crock pot, turn it on, and that would be it. However, she also knew that when you convert regular recipes to the crock pot, you've got to play around with the liquids and the spices. So she went looking. She found recipes. That was the problem. She found too many of them. So what she did was she made this grid. It was very organized. And she started looking at how to adjust the spices and the liquids and the cooking times. She tried a few of them out. She got one, and it worked out terrific. It tasted just like the one her husband and her son liked. There was just one problem. The meatballs fell apart. They were just mush. So she went back. She adjusted the liquid. Came out perfectly. They were very happy with her meatball recipe, and she was very happy that they could make it while she was gone. Another great asset to the tolerance of complexity is that it's great when you're working on a problem with another person or you're in a group project. I'll give you an example. I have a friend, and I discovered in talking to her that I missed her 50th birthday. I mean, by months, and I felt really bad. Only she said to me, that's okay, I consider the entire year my 50th birthday. So I thought, okay. I went home to a mutual friend and I said, we got to do something for her. Of course, our first idea is we'll just take her out to dinner. Then we thought we'll do a little party next weekend. Well, we couldn't do that because everybody that she knew was out of town. So we're all in a book club together, and I realized that our next meeting was almost 6 months after her birthday. So I called everybody up and I said, let's make it exactly 6 months after her birthday. Then we can throw her a half birthday party. Now, full disclosure, I didn't come up with this idea. Somebody did in college because we were all celebrating birthdays, and the summer people complained they didn't get theirs celebrated. So we did half birthday parties. But we just had pizza and beer. We didn't do anything elaborate. My friends all wanted to do something much more elaborate. So we started coming up with different ideas for the decor and the food. For the decor, one of the things that we did was we made cups out of plastic that looks like a half and the cup, and plates, same thing, clear plastic and a plate, so you have a half birthday plate. We came up with half birthday hats. We did put elastic on them. But I'll tell you the tough one, the real problem, was coming up with a half napkin. Let me just go show you. You see how hard that was? Anyway, My other friends in the book club, they came up with oysters on the half shell and deviled eggs, which are half eggs. And we had half and half, which is half milk, half cream. We had half slices of cheese and bread and tomatoes and all that sort of thing. And of course, we ended with a half birthday cake. My friend was really thrilled. We had a great time doing it. And you can see we celebrated her birthday with not the first idea we came up with, but with other ideas down the road that we did with tolerance of complexity as a group. Now I'm going to talk about the third skill, the one I left as a mystery. That's because, ironically, there's really no mystery to this one. You are more familiar with using this skill than you are the other two. That's because in your life you've often had what we call light bulb moments. You know what I mean. Now, the third skill is not the light bulb moment, it's what leads up to the light bulb moment, called incubation. Now, incubation means that you simply let your conscious mind let go of the problem so that your unconscious mind can work on it. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. Your unconscious mind works a lot faster putting together ideas. And secondly, it doesn't judge what it's putting together as you know that the conscious mind does. So I'm going to give you an example of how to do this other than sleeping. You've heard the thing about sleep on it, and that's great and that works. But some other ways that you can incubate are to take a walk, go on a run, go on a bike ride, drive leisurely, not with traffic or any stress. You can also come home and you can take a bath, you can take a shower, you can do your dishes, vacuum, dust. If you notice the commonality here, they're all things that are very easy to do. Your body's doing something very rhythmic so that your unconscious mind can work on the problem. Since you're so familiar with this idea, I'm just going to give you one example. I had a friend who was a poor college student, and no, wait a minute, I don't mean he was a poor college student, I mean he was good, but he was poor, he was broke, and he had this old beat up car. And he was living in a very cold state, and during the winter, you know, he needed to heat it. The problem was he was also having an overheating engine. Well, he knew that if you turned on the heater and the fan at the same time, you could keep the engine from overheating, and also all that heat was coming in and keeping him warm. However, when he got to the spring and the summer, he was too warm. He was broiling. So he had to come up with a solution. He didn't have any more money than he did in the winter. One day he's driving leisurely along and he sees this windsock. You know, they measure the direction of the wind. And he gets this idea, this light bulb moment. He goes home, he gets 3 big black trash bags. He cuts the bottom off all of them. He tapes them with duct tape. And he makes basically a big, wide, flat hose. He connects that to the vent. He runs it through the middle seats and the back seat and out the back window. So now he can take the heat from the vent, he can leave on the fan, and all of it is going out the door. So the engine's not overheating, and neither is he. You can see how he used incubation to solve his problem. There's another aspect to using these 3 skills for everyday creativity. And that's that in addition to them being useful to solving your problems that are meaningful to you, there's an emotional element. I mean, you feel good when you come up with a solution for yourself. I know that when I came up with that hanger idea to put them in the paper boxes, I felt terrific. And my friend who came up with that black plastic bag hose, besides it being useful and saving him money, he felt pretty clever. And my friend that converted the meatball recipe to the crock pot, she felt pretty smart, she felt pretty clever. And also my husband, though he would never admit it, he was pleased that he came up with an idea to motivate his engineers, and that story about the flowers will be around in engineering departments for a long time. And I have to tell you that all of us, when we were working on the half birthday party, we had a ball. We were helping my friend celebrate her 50th, but we just had great fun doing it. So I'm going to leave you with a prescription for using these 3 skills: tolerance of ambiguity, tolerance of complexity, and incubation. And the first part of the prescription is, I want you to notice when you do use them. Now, incubation's easy. You've noticed when you've had light bulb moments. But just notice that you have been letting go of the problem so you could get there. And notice when you have a problem and you're willing to step back and not take the first solution, not judge ideas that come by until you get the one that works for you. Same thing with tolerance of complexity. You keep your direction, but you also defer judgment on ideas that come up with, again, till you get the one that works for you. One of the things that I do is that when I come up with a little bit of everyday creativity, I actually go, everyday creativity. Or if I notice other people coming up with it or things around in the world, I will comment on that. Sometimes I'll even take a picture. So you could do that too. You could take some pictures. You could post them on Facebook or social media of some sort. But I want you basically to think about what you've learned today, and you could start by using incubation and maybe get a great idea tomorrow morning.
Aryna, I loved your presentation. You're such a wonderful storyteller, aren't you?
I never knew that about myself.
Yes, you are. And I loved your examples of creativity, the examples of the party, the half party. I'd never heard that one before. So
up in college.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was a really funky example. And so, in terms of everyday creativity, I know that you are very passionate and very dedicated to making sure that people recognize their everyday creativity. But, some people would say, well, if we are thinking about creativity in those terms, that everyone is creative and we're creative on a daily basis, then doesn't that really make the term creativity a bit redundant? Why use the word creativity when everyone's doing it and everyone's capable of it?
I see what you're saying. But first off, I don't think everybody's thinking about it all the time. I think they're very unaware when they are being creative, which I talked about. People are unaware when they are, and they don't, and so therefore they don't acknowledge it, because you can't acknowledge what you're not aware of. And secondly, I think that it would not be a problem for me if it was as ubiquitous as you're saying. I mean, if everybody were doing creativity all the time, that would be great. I don't think that's true. I don't think you do it, 24 hours a day. You've got to take in information. You've got to take in sensory stimuli. You got to play with ideas in order to be creative. It doesn't come out of a vacuum. So I see why people would say, oh, well, then what's the big deal about being every day? Well, the emphasis that I'm making is that we try to put it into the realm, as we've talked about. It's not just for artists. It's not just for inventors. It's not just for people that think up ideas off the top of their head all the time. There's such a thing as adaptive creativity. We are always putting the focus on innovative creativity, like the brilliant light bulb idea. But for instance, the Wright brothers, although they didn't come up with the idea of flying, they've been around for a long time, they were the ones that made the apparatus to make it fly. However, but we consider that innovative because it was such a game changer from where we could do before, and hot air balloons and things like that. However, if nothing had been done in adaptive creativity from 1903 to now, we'd all be flying around in Wright brothers planes. So you can see the difference between the two. That's very innovative stuff, but then, all the things that came from there. And a lot of those were very small pieces of creativity that came along. It would be everyday type things. Oh, there were a lot of people getting patented what they were doing. It just got implemented into what was going on. So when I say everyday creativity, I call it that because you can do it every day, but
there are still skills to learn to do it. And I think there was another question. If I did, people often don't breathe right either. That's why
You are absolutely right. Yes.
People, they hold their breath when they're tense, and they do. People, and even if you want to go into the realm of thinking, of course, creativity does come out of thinking. I mean, just because you think automatically as a human being doesn't mean you can't learn about logic. That you can't learn to think more logically, more sanely, in a better direction. We all know examples of thinking that uses false syllogisms, that uses incorrect information and comes to completely wrong conclusions. So even though thinking is natural, breathing is natural, doesn't necessarily mean we do it in the most optimal way.
You're absolutely right.
Did I clarify it for you, Annie?
Yes, because you're absolutely right. Because even actors and actresses, very often they have to start by learning how to breathe properly.
Absolutely. Yes, and singers, just because they can carry a tune, if you can't support it with your breath, you can't get very far as a singer.
Yes,
so it's the same thing with creativity. Yes, it's a natural ability. In other words, you don't learn to be creative, but you can learn how to be more creative. I always tell people, if someone tells you they're going to be teaching you to be creative, they're lying to you. That's like teaching someone how to love. That's innate, but can you express it better? Creativity? Can you express love better? Sure. Can you remove some of the barriers that are in the way? Absolutely. And like I say, I just focus on, I want to see everybody be creative. I don't want everybody to think, oh, it's just the realm of these people who come up with an idea like Steve Jobs or like, artists of all types that we all get to know about, and it's just them. I want everybody to see that they can take little things like my hangers, like my friend's problem with the car, like my husband's situation with the late report, almost late, and it could come up with a lot more examples, of things. In fact, every day I'll say to myself, something I'll do, like a couple of days ago, I did something and I said, oh, everyday creativity. I did something and I go, everyday creativity. When it was talking about mini C and large C, and actually those were terms that were used. The idea that you were a famous person, you came up with some kind of creative idea that changed the culture, that made a big impact. And the mini C were smaller things, and then later I think it just got evolved into the term everyday creativity because it was just a little bit easier to use it that way. Running around saying mini C, I think probably got a little bit problematic to say, and it's just, there are many theories about creativity, just like psychology. There are many theories about psychology, and creativity is a subset of that. So there's many theories about what is it, and as I said, the most accepted one is novelty that's useful, because you can have novelty that doesn't solve the problem. It's not really creative. Or you can come up with a useful situation that just isn't new enough.
That's true. It has to be both novel and useful, doesn't it?
Yes. In fact, there's a very interesting phenomenon, I guess you'd call it, in Japan. It's called Shindingo. And what it is, it's a group of useless inventions. And they're these wild and funny things. And the first criteria is that it has to be absolutely useless. So although they come up with these very wild and when you think of unique ideas, the second criteria, the first criteria is it has to be useless. They'll kick it out if it actually would do something functional. So just having a great, crazy idea that seems, wow, unique, if it doesn't function, it doesn't solve a problem, it's not creative. Not according to that definition. Sometimes you have a chance, go into Chiningo and look it up, and it's fun. You'll have a good time with it.
Think about divergent and convergent thinking, because your example of the half birthday party, for example, that kind of smacks of the divergent thinking. It's like not thinking outside of the box, as it were, not kind of not following the conformist line of thinking. Well, we've missed my friend's birthday, and therefore, like, just wait for the next one. You actually thought outside the box, and so that was an example of divergent thinking.
Exactly. And actually,
some people are naturally better at convergent thinking, and some people are naturally better at divergent thinking, and it's a personality type. So do you think that there's any kind of value in trying to think divergently when actually it's just not who we are?
Well, I think there's both. I think if you're a very divergent thinker, I happen to be more in that category. It's important to know when you need to start picking out the ideas that are going to function. In creative problem solving is a process. You start out doing, actually, the first thing you do is you define the problem. Most people think, oh, you just jump into brainstorming. But the biggest part of creative problem solving is to define the problem. That takes the most time and the most effort, because most times the problem that people think they are solving is not the real problem. So that takes, but once you do get past that and you get into the actual brainstorming, and there's very specific rules for that. Mostly what people do with brainstorming is not really the correct way. Then you're doing all the divergent thinking. You're throwing out all the ideas and you're accepting all the ideas momentarily. Just for a moment. You're just not judging them. But then to get to the solution for the problem that you're working on, you have to put in convergent thinking. You can't possibly implement all these ideas that you come in. For one thing, you wouldn't have time or energy. Secondly, they're not all going to solve the problem. You've got to be selective. It's just that the way we tend to think in our minds naturally is we tend to judge things immediately and throw them out. And so we have to kind of reverse that process and do the divergent thinking. Let's bring in everything, even if it doesn't sound like it makes sense, even if it's been done before, even if it sounds like something else, just throw it all in the pot. And then we start asking, okay, what of that is really going to work? And you need both parts. You can't say one is better than the other. It depends on the phase that you're in the problem that you're solving. Does that make sense?
It does. But brainstorming itself as an activity is quite controversial, because I know it became very popular from the 60s onward. Osborne, who created that system, the strategy in the 60s. So, but when we look at the actual research, there's very little research that suggests that it has any value at all. In fact, some of the papers that I read, at least 2 or 3 papers that I read, suggested that brainstorming is really overrated, because when researchers have actually looked at 2 lots of groups, several groups, some using the brainstorming activity and some not, working individually. It's those people who were allowed to work individually that got much better ideas than those who worked in group. And the suggestion is that people who are creative, they need space, they need silence, they need to be working on their own for their best ideas, not in a group.
Okay, yeah, I've heard some of this too. Now, I have 2 points to say on that. A lot of what people think is brainstorming is not the way that Osborne designed it. He had 4 very specific rules, and if all those rules are not followed, it's not real brainstorming. You see what I'm saying?
But creatives don't follow rules.
But one of the rules is don't judge. And the main rule is to don't judge. And sometimes, and it's really hard to not do that. I've facilitated a lot of these creative problem solving sessions, and I've also been a part of one. And I'm telling you, that's the toughest part, is to get people to go, oh, I'll start to say an idea, and then they don't want to throw it out. So in one sense, I can see what you're saying, because people will censor what they're doing or say it. If I can get them to even start to say it, I'll say, whatever that is, just write it down, throw it into the mix, whatever it is. Another way that you can kind of get the best of both worlds is to do something called brain writing. And what you do is a form that has 9 boxes on it. And you can either put post-its in each box, or you can just write straight on the paper. And you give a person, you have the problem stated at the top of the paper, and then you give one person the first 3 rows, the first row to write, the first 3 boxes, and they write whatever comes up. Then you hand it to the person behind you, and then they do the next 3 and the next 3, and you keep doing this. So for some people that works better because it's silent. You know, you're just writing it down. Nobody's hearing what you're saying. Mm. And if you don't keep track of who's writing what after a while, you don't know, who's writing what. You're not going to be the judgment. And I do see what you're saying. I think maybe for introverted people, it might be better to work.
That would be a lot better for me because
right.
I like space, and put me in a group for brainstorming. I'll be the person who just lets other people do the saying, do that. But if you forced me to write something, then I would.
You would probably come up with something. And I do think maybe not enough research has been done on the role of personality in brainstorming techniques. I think maybe we need to do more on that. I haven't read a lot on that. But I have heard this thing where brainstorming has been
yes.
denigrated.
There's a TED talk as well on how it's about introverts. And in the TED talk, the speaker, she talks about how that was a torture for her, taking part in brainstorming activity, because as an introvert, that's not really the way that we express our creativity, not in a group.
I'm married to an introvert, so I understand. They just need a little bit more time to think about things, and more pressure doesn't make it better. It's not diamonds. Pressure makes it worse.
That's right. Absolutely. So pressure makes it worse, and dominant personalities will suppress the ideas, basically. And
as a teacher, you try to get those personalities to speak up in your classroom, and that's often difficult because they have great ideas when you finally do get them to speak up or write. So often I would
have to come naturally without being forced. And yet at the same time, I am the kind of person that in a group situation, unless you force me to put forward my ideas, I will relax and let other people do the thing.
Right.
It's a contradiction there. Right.
Have I cleared up some things about everyday creativity, though? Is there anything more you'd want to know on that?
No, that's really useful. So we've talked about how even things like breathing, that everyone does breathing naturally, but even things like breathing we can learn to improve, and maybe we can apply that kind of metaphor to creativity, that even though each one of us is creative, there are still things that we can learn, and things like, we still need to explore a lot more about personality and the strategies that we use for being creative, and in terms of divergent and convergent thinking and brainstorming activities, that it's not like one, that one strategy will be excellent for everyone. We're all very different, aren't we?
Yes, and the science is so new. I mean, we only counted from like 1955 as it being a science. I mean, this is just not a lot of time. Even psychology is I guess we counted from the publication of Freud's book in 1900. So it's only 117 years old. This is about 7 years old. We just don't know. And we're just learning all things about the brain. Look what we just learned about the brain about teenagers in the last few years. And the plasticity of aging brains. We thought that they didn't change after a certain, we now know that's not true. So we're just learning so much more about the brain. So naturally, we're going to learn more and more about creativity.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Aryna, that was excellent. Thank you very, very much. And I look forward to
technical worked out.
continuing our conversations another time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.